My name is Autumn Miller. I am 33 years old and I live in Denver, Colorado. I work as an accountant for a small construction company, a job that looks stable on the outside but drains me completely. Every week I put in at least 55 to 60 hours, buried in endless numbers and reports. My paycheck covers rent for a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, food and bills, but I never feel secure. A single unexpected expense like car repairs or medical costs can throw me into chaos. I have grown used to financial pressure, but what exhausts me more than money is my family. My parents divorced when I was 13. Just 2 years later, they both remarried and built separate lives. I am still their daughter, yet sometimes I feel like nothing more than a faint shadow in the new family portraits they painted. My father, Richard Miller, teaches chemistry at a high school. After the divorce, he married Elaine, a real estate agent. Elaine is well known in the family for her flashy lifestyle, closets filled with designer brands, vacations in Miami or Las Vegas, and her constant air of superiority toward anyone who doesn't match her luxury standards. My father has been drawn deeper into Elaine's whirlwind of spending, living beyond his means, but whenever it comes to supporting me, he always shakes his head, saying he doesn't have extra. My mother, Margaret, remarried too. Her husband, Harold, owns a small business and is far wealthier than my father, but notorious for being tight-fisted. He measures every expense and believes every dollar must yield a direct benefit. Their suburban home is large and comfortable, yet I never feel it belongs to me. In Harold's eyes, I am simply my wife's daughter, and therefore his responsibility toward me is practically non-existent. I have a younger sister, Emily, 29, the golden child in my mother's eyes. She studied at a prestigious East Coast university, earned a master's degree and married Daniel, a surgeon at a major hospital in Chicago. They live in a spacious house with 2 adorable children. Emily is always praised as successful, the family role model. Meanwhile, I am constantly compared and belittled, even though I have quietly shouldered financial burdens whenever the family needed help. My older brother, Michael, 35, is another story. He is smart and charming but has never held down a steady job. From sales to failed startups, he often ends up drowning in debt. His habit is to call me in the middle of the night, crying and begging for a few $1,000s to get through a tough time, promising to repay me. But then he disappears only to return when the next crisis hits. My mother's side of the family is just as complicated. Aunt Martha, my mom's younger sister, is the only person I truly feel I can trust. She works as an elementary school teacher, lives in a cramped apartment, and drives an old Toyota that rattles every time it starts. Even without much money, she always shows up when I need her, whether to take me to the hospital or simply listen when I need to talk. In contrast, Aunt Ruth, my father's sister, always acts superior. She married a wealthy husband and since then has looked down on anyone who doesn't meet her standards. At every holiday gathering, she throws in snide remarks. "Autumn, when are you going to move out of that tiny apartment and think about a proper house?" Her son, Ryan, inherited her entitlement but none of her success. He has a gambling addiction, drowning in debt, and the family pretends not to notice. I once drained my entire savings to help Michael go to rehab, only to discover he never even stepped inside the center. I charged part of Emily's extravagant wedding to my credit card, with her promise to pay me back after the honeymoon, but more than 4 years have passed and not a single dollar has returned. Even my father, when his roof leaked after a storm, I scraped together a few $1,000s to help him. Yet just a month later, I saw photos of him and Elaine vacationing in Mexico, cocktails in hand, smiling brightly. Those financial scars have eroded my trust. I still work hard, still try to save, but deep down I carry the fear that my family only sees me as a walking wallet. The only person who knows the full extent of how I've been taken advantage of is my best friend Rachel, a nurse I met in college. Rachel understands what I endure and is always the one who pulls me back whenever I feel like giving up. An endless loop of exhausting work, constant bills, and disappointment from the very people who should have been my support has trapped me in a cycle I cannot escape. My 33rd birthday fell on a Friday right after another grueling workweek. My boss had just smiled and accepted the credit for a financial report I had spent sleepless nights completing. I walked out of the office feeling hollow. No one at work remembered my birthday and there was no family dinner waiting for me. On my way home, I stopped by the familiar convenience store on Colfax, where the old owner, Gus, always greeted me with the same line, "What's new today, Autumn?" I forced a faint smile and handed him a $20 bill. "Give me a few lottery tickets. It's my birthday, I feel like taking a risk." Gus chuckled, slipped me a stack of tickets and said, "Maybe this will be your surprise gift." Instead of letting the machine pick numbers as usual, this time I wrote my own sequence. I chose my mother's birthday, 5 my father's, 14 Emily's, 22 Michael's, 27 Aunt Martha's, 8 and finally the day I met Rachel, 11. 6 small numbers meant only to comfort myself, unknowingly became the turning point of my life. That evening I ordered pizza, opened the bottle of wine Rachel had given me, and turned on the TV just to fill the silence of my apartment. At exactly 8 p.m. the lottery results were announced. I held the ticket without hope, already used to disappointment. Then, 5 appeared. My heart skipped. Next was 14. I held my breath. 22. 27. 8. And finally 11. I froze, the wine bottle slipping from my hand, spilling across the wooden floor. The 6 numbers matched perfectly. I grabbed my phone, checked the official website, and there was no mistake. I was the sole winner of a $52 million jackpot. After taxes, that meant about $31 million. For a woman who had just been worrying about paying the electric bill, it was beyond comprehension. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I scrolled through stories of past lottery winners. What I found were not fairy tales but tragedies. Friends turning away, families ripped apart by greed, winners bankrupt within a few years. Some even lost their lives to people who coveted their wealth. I shuddered, realizing that if this secret got out, my family would descend on me like starving wolves. The very next morning I called and booked an appointment with a financial attorney, Philip Harris, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and sharp yet kind eyes. When I slid the ticket across his desk, he only raised his eyebrows slightly before nodding. "You came to the right place. The most important thing now is silence and a solid plan." We spent 2 hours discussing. Philip explained how to set up an anonymous trust to claim the winnings, how to diversify investments so the money would hold its value, and how to protect my identity. "The biggest mistake winners make is showing off too soon. Once the word spreads, you'll never know peace again," he warned. I nodded, cold sweat running down my back. I had never held anything this big in my hands. All I could do was write down every word, trying to keep my emotions under control. For the next 2 weeks, on the surface, nothing changed. I still went to work. I still drove my old Corolla each morning. But behind the scenes, a new world was being built. Investment accounts, retirement funds, insurance policies, and a long-term plan to ensure I could live comfortably even at 100. Sometimes, alone in my tiny apartment, I wanted to scream to the world that I had finally broken free from financial fear. But then I remembered Elaine's mocking words when she once told me I'd never be like Emily. I remembered Ruth's condescending remarks and Michael's silence after borrowing money. Those memories only deepened my resolve to stay quiet. Yet the weight of secrecy pressed on me like a stone. Sitting in that small apartment, I thought about my mother, my father, and the relatives who had hurt me. A dangerous thought crept in. What if I tested them? What if I pretended to be in trouble, to see how they would treat me when I had nothing? If they chose to help without knowing what I now had, I would finally know who truly valued me. The idea grew stronger, like an underground fire spreading through me. I hadn't decided yet, but deep inside I knew I was about to do something bold. A test that would strip away the mask from the Miller family. When all the legal procedures with attorney Philip were finalized, I officially became a woman who could live comfortably for the rest of her life. Yet instead of pure happiness, I felt uneasy. Lying awake at night, I couldn't stop thinking about my family. I remembered Elaine's eyes scanning me up and down, Ruth's smirk, and Michael's desperate messages that always ended in silence. If news of my lottery win ever leaked, they would swarm around me like vultures circling a carcass. That was when a bold plan took shape. I wanted to test them. I needed to know if one day I hit rock bottom, who in my family would truly reach out their hand. I decided to invent a story. That the company I worked for had gone bankrupt, I lost my job, and I needed $5,000 to pay rent and medical bills. It wasn't an impossible number for my family, especially Emily with her lavish Chicago home, or my father and Elaine who bragged about their new real estate. But it was just enough to draw a line between those who helped out of love and those who turned away for self-interest. I spent hours crafting the script. I told myself the company had suddenly shut down because the director was under investigation, my last paycheck withheld, and my health insurance suspended. I added that I had just undergone a series of medical tests because of poor health, leaving me drained by hospital bills. I practiced how to say it, where to pause, even stood in front of the mirror to control my expression. Rachel, my best friend, was the first to hear about the plan. I invited her to my apartment and confessed that I intended to test the heart of my family. Rachel's eyes widened as she set her teacup down so hard that liquid splashed out. Autumn, are you serious? This sounds more like a dangerous game than a test. I need to know the truth, I said firmly. I've drained my savings for them again and again. If I were truly in trouble, would they stand by me? I need an answer. Rachel sighed and looked straight at me. You know the outcome will hurt more than you expect. But if you're determined, I won't stop you. Just be ready. That night, I opened a leather notebook and wrote down every name. Mom, Margaret and Harold; Dad, Richard and Elaine; Emily and her husband Daniel; my brother Michael; Aunt Martha; Aunt Ruth and Ryan, her reckless son. Each of them had taken from me at one point or another. Now they would face a different Autumn, one who was vulnerable and in need. I imagined each response. Mom might act sympathetic, but Harold would surely refuse. Dad would lecture me about financial foresight and wash his hands of me. Elaine would be blunt. Emily, buried in her kids' swim lessons and a kitchen renovation, would likely offer only kind words. Michael, I didn't dare hope. Ruth would take the chance to scold me about my failures. Ryan, he was already drowning in debt. The only one I believed might actually do something even with limited means was Aunt Martha. The plan sounded cruel, but I had no other way to see the truth of relationships already cracked. I didn't want to live forever with the fear that my family only saw me as a walking wallet. The next day, I met Philip again to make sure every cent of my money was fully protected. After hearing me out, he frowned but didn't object. You're searching for truth. Just remember, sometimes the truth comes in the harshest reactions. He reminded me to keep all important documents in a safe so no one could ever trace my secret. That night, I sat in my quiet apartment, the old Corolla parked downstairs. Outside my window, Denver's autumn air was crisp and cold. I clutched my phone tightly. With one call, the plan would begin. I knew that after this test there would be no turning back. Whatever illusion of love my family had might shatter completely, revealing the truth I'd long suspected. I took a deep breath, opened my contacts and saw Margaret, Mom, glowing on the screen. My finger trembled. This would be the opening move, the moment to find out how the woman who gave me life would react when I said, I need $5,000 or I'll lose this apartment. Yes. A gamble of the heart. And I was ready to roll the first dice. I took a deep breath and called my mother. Her voice came through, slightly rushed as if she were busy. I carefully laid out the story I had prepared. The company shut down, my last paycheck withheld, medical bills piling up. I forced my voice to tremble, trying to sound desperate. Oh my goodness, Autumn, my mom exclaimed. That's terrible. But have you tried applying for unemployment? Or asking your father? Harold and I are still paying off the vacation house in Montana. Our budget is really tight. I bit my lip. She never said no, but every word pushed the responsibility onto someone else. Maybe try Emily. Daniel's a doctor, surely they can handle it better, she added with a falsely soothing tone. I whispered, yes, I understand. But inside I knew she would do nothing more. The next day I met Dad at a small cafe near the school where he taught. As soon as we sat down, he frowned. You look exhausted. What's going on? I repeated the story, including the $5,000 I needed. Dad set his coffee down, slowly drumming his fingers on the table. Autumn, how many times have I told you always keep at least 6 months of savings? This is a hard lesson you need to learn. I forced a smile. But Dad, I've tried everything. I just need help this once. He shook his head firmly. Elaine and I are preparing for retirement. We can't spend carelessly. Take this as a chance to change your lifestyle. Elaine cut in sharply. We have no obligation to finance you at your age. You need to learn true independence. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Next was Emily. I drove nearly 2 hours to her suburban home where the lawn was neatly trimmed. She hugged me, eyes wide as I told the story. Oh my gosh, sis, how did this happen? She pulled me into the kitchen and poured a latte from her sleek coffee machine. My heart flickered with hope. But when I mentioned the $5,000, she hesitated. Sis, this is really tough timing. We just bought a new SUV for the kids and remodeled the bathroom. I'll have to check with Daniel, he manages all the finances. I sat in silence. She quickly added, if you need, you can stay in our guest room. We'll tidy it up. I nodded, already knowing I would never accept. As for Michael, I didn't want to call but couldn't skip him. I texted a brief version of the situation. An hour later he replied, that's rough. I'm strapped too. I'll help when I can. Then nothing. When I called, the phone rang and went to voicemail. In the following days my texts went unanswered. The same brother who once wept begging me for thousands of dollars now couldn't spare a few minutes to listen. I tried my luck with Aunt Ruth. After hearing me out, she gave a short, cold laugh. I told you to choose a stable job instead of that tiny company. Now you see the result. Adults must take responsibility, Autumn. Her voice cut like a knife, not a single word of comfort. Ryan, her son, acted eager. Don't worry, cousin, I'll help. I'll pull it together this week. But when the day came, he made excuses, then disappeared. I knew he never meant it from the start. I closed my list, heart heavy as stone. Every person I had once helped. Now they either made excuses, criticized, or vanished. I thought I had braced myself, but each cold response still stabbed at my heart. One afternoon, as I sat silently on my sofa, the phone rang unexpectedly. It was Aunt Martha. She hadn't even been on my list, but somehow had heard from my mom. Autumn, are you all right? I heard you lost your job. Her voice was full of worry. I choked out, I'm trying to get by. She didn't press, only asked me to meet her at a small diner nearby. The next day I went. She was the same as always. An old sweater, silver hair neatly tied back, her gentle smile. After a few caring questions, she pulled an envelope from her purse. I have $3,000. I know it's not enough, but at least you can cover rent this month. If you need, my little apartment always has space for you. I froze. I knew her teacher's salary barely covered her own needs, and she still had to pay for her diabetes medication. I shook my head. And I can't take it. You need this money yourself. But she pushed the envelope toward me. Family helps each other. You've given so much to everyone else, now it's my turn. I looked at her thin, worn hands and emotion surged in my chest. The wealthiest, most comfortable ones found excuses, while the one with the least, struggling herself, gave the most. That night, alone, I opened the envelope. $3,000, nearly all her savings. I cried not for the money, but because the truth stood stark before me. Only Martha loved me without condition. I closed my journal, a new resolve burning inside me. This test was over. I finally had the answer to the question haunting me all these years. In the Miller family, who was truly my family. And now I was ready to take my next step, but not in the way they would expect. That night I couldn't close my eyes. The envelope Aunt Martha had given me still lay on the table, a quiet reminder of the stark difference between her and the rest of the family. I knew I couldn't keep lying to her. The only person who had been genuine with me deserved to know the truth. The next day I invited her to my apartment. She walked in carrying a small bag of toast and a jar of homemade jam. I thought you might not be eating properly, so I brought a little something, she said softly. My throat tightened with gratitude and guilt. We sat on the old sofa, afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. Looking into her kind eyes, I gathered all my courage. Aunt Martha, there's something I need to tell you. The truth is, I lied. Her eyebrows lifted, not with anger but curiosity. I took a deep breath. I didn't lose my job. I don't actually need rent money. I made it all up, to see who in the family would help if I were in trouble. And only you did. Silence hung between us. I feared she would be disappointed, but she only sighed and laid her thin hand on mine. I'm not angry. I'm sad you had to resort to this just to know the truth. But I understand. Tears welled up. Before I could respond, she gently began. Do you know why I divorced my ex-husband? Everyone just said we fell out of love, but the truth was far more bitter. I stayed quiet, listening. Back then, when your grandmother passed, I inherited $40,000. For me, that was a huge sum. I wanted to save it to buy a small home to settle down. But my ex-husband, Robert, changed when he saw the money. Under the pretense of investing for our future, He forged my signature and withdrew it all to put into his friend's restaurant. In less than a year, the restaurant went bankrupt. The money was gone and so was the marriage. When I confronted him, he said, "It's our money, I had the right." That was when I realized, money doesn't change people, it only reveals who they really are. Her voice shook, but her gaze was steady. Autumn, you've seen it yourself. Who cares who only sees you as a wallet? It's clear. Never forget, money can buy many things but never sincerity. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. You're the only one who didn't turn away. I can't keep hiding it. Martha. I won the lottery. $52 million. After taxes, about $31 million. I've done all the legal work to keep it secret. You're the first person I've told. She froze, her eyes wide, her hand trembling. Oh my God, Autumn, you're serious? I confirmed. She sat in silence for a moment, then gave a faint smile. My dear, that's a great gift, but also a test. I'm happy you can finally be free from worry. But remember, the more money you have, the more careful you must be in relationships. I squeezed her hand tightly. I want to use this money to take care of you. You've sacrificed so much. I know medicine and hospital bills have strained you. I'll buy you a small, comfortable home where you'll never have to worry again. She quickly waved her hand. No, Autumn. I don't need that. I'm used to my old apartment, used to living simply. I looked at her firmly. You gave to me when you had nothing. I'll give to you now that I have everything. Not out of pity but gratitude. Her eyes shimmered, and at last she gave a slight nod. If you've decided, I won't stop you. But never let money control you. Use it to build a meaningful life and share it only with those who deserve it. That evening, as she left, I stood at the window watching her small but resilient figure disappear down the street. In that moment, I realized the money hadn't just bought me freedom. It had given me the chance to repay, the chance to rewrite what family meant. A family built on love, not exploitation. A week after my conversation with Aunt Martha, I made a decision I never thought I'd have the courage to make. I summoned the entire family to my small apartment. I typed a short message to each of them. This Sunday, 5 p.m., come to Autumn's place. There's something important to discuss. I offered no explanation. I knew curiosity would make them come. On the appointed day, they filed in one by one. My mother, Margaret, arrived with Harold, both looking reluctant. My father, Richard, wore an old button-down, while Elaine carried a brand-new designer purse. Emily and her husband, Daniel, brought their kids only to leave them in the car with the nanny. Michael showed up last, disheveled, reeking of alcohol. As expected, Aunt Ruth came too, dragging Ryan along, his face pale and tired, though he forced a smile. The living room, small to begin with, suddenly felt crowded, the tension thick in the air. Standing in the center, my heart pounded, but my voice was steady. Thank you for coming. Today I want to talk about what happened recently. When I pretended to need help, only one person in this family truly reached out. The rest, I let my gaze sweep over their faces, offered excuses, silence, or criticism. The room erupted. Margaret jumped in. Autumn, you can't blame me. You know Harold is strict with finances. I couldn't decide on my own. Harold cut in coldly. And why should we be responsible for your career choices? My father cleared his throat, arms crossed. Autumn, you're being too sensitive. I didn't refuse out of indifference. I wanted to teach you a lesson about preparation. Adults must face hardship. Elaine added sharply, if you expect others to carry you, don't be surprised when you never grow up. Emily sighed, her voice syrupy and insincere. Sis, I truly wanted to help, but our expenses were overwhelming. I even offered you a place to stay. Wasn't that helping? Daniel sat beside her, silent, only nodding. Michael let out a bitter laugh. Please, like I'm rolling in money. I've got debts of my own. If you needed help, why not ask Mom more? Ruth couldn't hide her smugness. I told you, Autumn, being an accountant at some small firm would never be stable. Now you blame us when you should have listened to me in the first place. Ryan piped up, Cousin, I really did mean to help, but things got complicated. Don't think I didn't care. I stood still, letting the excuses wash over me. Then I spoke, slow but sharp. To be honest, I'm not surprised. I've helped every single one of you, from small favors to thousands of dollars. But when I needed help, only Aunt Martha stepped forward. She gave me nearly all her savings even though she's sick herself. That says everything. Martha sat quietly in the corner, lowering her head. I continued, I don't need more excuses. I don't need guilt. I just want you all to know this. From now on, I'm setting boundaries. Don't call me in the middle of the night for loans. Don't expect me to fund vacations, weddings, or bailouts. We're still family, but this relationship will no longer be built on me paying the price to be valued. Silence fell. Margaret's lips trembled. So, you're cutting ties with us? I shook my head. No. I'm just refusing to be used anymore. I've accepted a new job with better pay and benefits. I don't need anyone to support me. I can take care of myself. Richard raised an eyebrow. Well, good. I'm glad you've finally understood personal responsibility. Elaine smirked coldly. Emily sighed to Daniel, whispering that I was being dramatic. Michael avoided my eyes, fiddling with his phone. I knew then they would never change. Their excuses only confirmed what I already knew. They never truly saw me as family, just as a convenience. The meeting ended quickly. One by one, they left with irritated looks. Only Martha stayed behind to help me clear the table. When the door finally closed, I sat down and drew in a long breath. For the first time in my life, I felt lighter, as though I had shed years of silence. Martha laid a hand on my shoulder, smiling gently. You did the right thing. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's how you protect your worth. I nodded, a quiet strength rising inside me. After that tense family meeting, I realized it was time to rewrite my life. In the days that followed, I returned to the office, staring at spreadsheets and contracts, but my heart felt empty. I no longer wanted to spend my youth working for a company that never valued me. One morning, I walked into my boss's office, placed my resignation on the desk, and said firmly, I've given enough. Now it's time to build something meaningful for myself. I didn't choose to retire in luxury. Instead, I began planning a nonprofit. The idea came from Aunt Martha herself. A woman who lived simply, gave quietly, and rarely received support. I wanted this foundation to serve elderly people who had been forgotten by their families. After many meetings with attorney Philip and a team of advisors, the Silver Light Foundation was born. Our mission was to provide medical support, home repairs, and most importantly, companionship for seniors living alone. At the same time, I searched for a new home. After weeks of looking, I bought a modest 2-story house in a quiet Denver suburb. The backyard was big enough for the rose garden I'd always dreamed of but never dared buy when money was tight. Just a few blocks away, Aunt Martha moved into her own new home, purchased under the foundation's name so she wouldn't feel like a burden. It was a cozy 1-story with wide doors for the days when her health faltered. Seeing her smile in that bright kitchen, I knew I had made the right choice. From then on, my life completely changed. Mornings were spent running the foundation, afternoons with volunteers visiting seniors, listening to their stories. No longer haunted by bills or deadlines, I found joy in the gratitude shining in their eyes. Rachel, my best friend, joined too, taking charge of the medical programs. We often joked that from 2 struggling women, we had become partners in a mission bigger than ourselves. As for the Miller family, I kept in touch, but only at arm's length. On birthdays and Christmas, I sent cards, sometimes made brief calls. No more long conversations filled with blame or expectations. They felt the distance but seemed not to care. I realized that sometimes, thin connections bring more peace than forced closeness. Still, there were moments when I quietly helped them, not out of obligation but compassion. When Richard was hospitalized with a heart attack and the bills exceeded insurance, the hospital suddenly received an anonymous payment. When Ryan, in a rare moment of resolve, entered rehab, the costs were covered by a mystery sponsor. No one ever knew it was me. I didn't want that help turned into another reason for them to use me. I only wanted to know I'd done the right thing, even if they never thanked me. In the evenings, I often sat in my garden, watching the warm lights glow from Martha's house nearby. She often came over for dinner or we tended plants together. One night she laughed and said, "Autumn, you've turned fate's gift into something meaningful." Not everyone could do that. I simply held her frail hand, knowing I was no longer alone. Rachel stopped by often too, bringing stories from the hospital or sharing wine with me on the porch. "I've never seen you this happy," she said, her eyes warm. I smiled and replied, "Because for the first time, I'm living my own life, not anyone else's." The old doors had closed. No longer trapped in the false responsibilities of my family, no longer belittled or used, I built a new community. One rooted in respect and genuine care. Each morning as sunlight spilled through my windows, I knew I had chosen well. My life hadn't changed just because of a lottery ticket, but because I dared to set boundaries, dared to stand up, and most of all, dared to trust the right people. And deep inside, I sometimes wondered, if the Miller family ever discovered the whole truth, would they regret how they treated me? I wasn't sure. But it no longer mattered. Because at last I had found freedom, peace, and a true home of my own. 1 year later, as I sat on the porch of my new home, watching the rose garden sway in the evening breeze, I realized the journey behind me had given me a lesson no check could ever buy. The lottery ticket had changed my life, but what truly transformed me wasn't the lucky numbers. It was the raw truth it revealed. The Miller family stayed the same. Emily occasionally sent photos of her children at lavish birthday parties but rarely asked how I was. Richard and Elaine continued their act of living well, posting vacation pictures while complaining about medical costs. Michael vanished until he needed someone to listen to his debts. Ruth never gave up her sharp remarks at rare gatherings, and Ryan, I heard he had fallen back into gambling. Instead of feeling angry or bitter, I felt relieved. Because now I no longer expected anything from them. I no longer wondered if I was worthy of their love. The lottery hadn't changed anyone's nature. It had only clarified what was already true, that to most of my family my worth was measured only by the money I could hand over. With Aunt Martha and Rachel, I saw something entirely different. Martha gave me nearly everything when I had nothing to offer back. Rachel listened to every frustration I poured out, never asking for anything in return. People like them taught me that the true value of a relationship isn't in the numbers in your account, but in who will still hold your hand when you have nothing left but yourself. I'll never forget one moment when the Silverlight Foundation held a gathering for local seniors. An 82-year-old woman, her hair snow-white, gripped my hand and whispered, "Thank you. Not for the money, but because you reminded me I still matter." Her words made my heart tremble. In that instant, I understood. Happiness didn't come from winning the lottery, but from how I chose to use that gift to create meaning. Sometimes I think if I had announced my win, maybe my family would have suddenly become more loving than ever. But then I'd never know who was genuine and who was there for the money. The test I gave them, harsh as it was, gave me the most precious freedom. Freedom from illusions. One autumn evening, Martha sat beside me on the porch, her eyes glimmering under the light. She said softly, "Autumn, you've used the money in the right way. But more importantly, you've learned to see what's real and what's not." I squeezed her hand and replied, "I finally understand, Aunt. Money doesn't change people. It only reveals who they really are." I believe if anyone hears my story, they'll understand that wealth is not the key to happiness. The only thing that creates happiness is knowing who deserves to walk beside you on the long road ahead. And that choice, sometimes painful, is the only thing that saves us from toxic ties. I smiled gently, looking toward Martha's little house a few blocks away. I knew I had found my true family, not defined by blood but by unconditional love. Autumn's story reflects a bitter yet valuable truth in real life. Money doesn't change who people are. It simply exposes who truly cares and who only seeks to take advantage. In today's world, many face family ties full of calculation, where love is traded for material gain. But like Autumn, everyone has the right to set boundaries, to seek and cherish genuine relationships. True happiness comes from peace of mind and unconditional love. What do you think about Autumn's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more stories about life, family, and the hidden corners of